Hey guys! In today's video, I wanted to show you 3 different ways how you can paint a nebula using 3 different supplies. Don't forget to click on the bell and to comment below #Modification Squad in the first 24 hours for a chance to get a shout out and to win arts and crafts supplies in my ongoing giveaway. And now let's jump into the tutorial. The first thing I did was I used masking fluid to apply it all around the edge of the circles I created. This way I don't have to worry about painting outside the lines. Once the masking fluid was dry, I went ahead to paint the first nebula using watercolors. The way I like to create galaxies and nebulas is by starting with a really bright color and build it up with darker colors around it. So for this painting, I applied a really bright green color to the center and distributed it in a rather wavy way to make it look more natural. Next, you want to add a darker color around the brighter area and blend the edges together. Here I mixed a light green color with a little bit of blue, but you can use any colors for your nebula, of course. Move the brush really loosely and don't think too much. We want the paint to melt into each other really naturally and flowy so it looks more realistic. Distribute the paint until you cover the whole area around the bright color, and from here we can build up the intensity even more to create more depth. I mixed in a little bit of yellow to the center to make the green even more saturated and bright, and added more blue color paint to the rest of the painting. Make sure you keep one area really bright, and the further you move away from the spot, the darker the paint should become. But make sure you don't use too much water. You need just enough so you can move the paint around and make different colors blend into each other without creating puddles. It's also important to paint the first layer in one go without letting the paint dry, or otherwise you can get blotchy areas or the different colors won't mix together properly and you will get harsh edges in the end. I also used a dark brown color to create even darker areas in my nebula, but you can also use black instead. I just like the way the colors look when I use brown color paint. While the first layer of paint is drying, we can move on to the second method how you can paint a nebula. This time we are going to use water-based markers. Here I use Crayola and edding markers, both are water-based and perfect for this method. The steps are similar. We want to start with a bright color and add darker paint around it. So first I applied a yellow color to the center in a rather loose way, and then added different green shades all around it. Here you want to apply the markers in a similar shape as you want the nebula to look in the end. Next, load up your brush with water and go over the markers to activate the ink. This way you turn the ink of the markers into paint that is similar to watercolors. Now you can distribute the paint the same way as we did with the watercolors. Move the darker paint around and melt different shades together to make it look similar to the first painting. The problem here is that you might not be able to add more ink on top with your marker while the paper is wet. But what you can do is you can use a mixing palette and add the ink into the mixing palette by just painting on it. This way you create small puddles of ink that you can use in your painting. I created small puddles of green, yellow, and black marker ink in my mixing palette and then used it as a watercolor palette to darken a few areas in my painting. This is how the painting looks so far. While the first layer is drying, let's move on to the third way how you can paint a nebula. Here I'm going to use watercolor pencils. And because I want to be able to blend the colors really smoothly, I will be using the same technique that I showed you in one of my previous videos. And that's creating a color palette first. Here I'm going to use similar colors and just draw small circles onto some thick paper. And now we can use it as a palette. Load up your brush with water and activate the pigments on the color palette as you would do that with watercolors. I started with a really bright yellow and green color and distribute the pigments the same way as we did in the previous paintings. You can also draw directly onto the paper and then activate the pigments as I showed you with the markers, but depending on your pencils and the way you draw, you might not be able to blend the colors really smoothly because at some areas the pencil will be stuck to the paper that you can't really blend out without overworking your paper. Another problem with watercolor pencils is that they might dry really pale and it's difficult to intensify the colors while you apply the first layer. So here we will just let it dry and then go over all the nebulas to intensify everything as much as we can. Once the paint has dried, we can go back to our first nebula and intensify the colors even more. Here I used a really dark blue and brown color for the outer edges of the nebula and blended it out with clean water. Here I used more green and yellow colors and dabbed on the paint really loosely so the texture looks more like clouds. Remember to keep one area really clean and bright while creating more dimension with darker shades around it. And I did the same with the markers. I applied the same shades on top so we have more ink to work with and then blended the ink the same way as in the beginning. I also tried to add the marker straight into the wet paper to see if it will work. It did, but I still feel like you don't get the same smooth result, but rather a streaky surface. Let's move on to the watercolor pencil nebula. Here I repeat the same steps and cover the areas with the same color in the same way. As you can see, the colors got a lot more darker and more saturated, but they look still a little bit more pale compared to the other two paintings. You can let everything dry again and intensify the colors even more by creating the third layer, but I think it looks great already. Now we can go ahead and add the stars. For this step, I'm going to mix white acrylic paint with lots of water and splash the paint using an old toothbrush. This way you can create lots of small round stars. This can be messy but fun. Remove any excess paint around the paintings, and then you can add even more stars with a thin brush. This way you can create stars in different shapes and make them a little bit bigger as well. Let everything completely dry, remove the masking fluid, and the nebulas are finished. If you want, you can outline the nebulas with a black marker or a black watercolor pencil to even out the edges if necessary, and you're done. Now I would love to know, what method do you like the most? The markers look a lot more vibrant compared to the rest, but the watercolors create a really interesting texture. So I think I like both. What do you guys think? A huge shout out to VGS, thank you so much for watching my videos. I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up to support this channel. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and to click on the bell to get notified when I upload a new video on Thursdays and on Saturdays. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon. Bye!